growth, success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, you Road to Growth listeners. Today I have Mark Myers. He is the founder and CEO of Peak Profit Solutions. And if you're watching us live on YouTube, you'll notice in the background there's a couple cars going by. If you're listening to us on the podcast, you would be never the wiser probably. Yet business happens wherever you are, and we're looking to make things happen with the situation that we're in. Let's jump into it. So the interesting thing about Mark, he helps people out save money on taxes, yet he's not a CPA. And so most people are like, well, how does that happen? Mark, can you give a brief synopsis into what your company and yourself do?
Absolutely. You know, you hit the nail on the head. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Vinny. This is going to be hopefully a lot of fun. I enjoy what you do and how you do it. And I'm excited about being on the call today. And yes, I had some internet challenges, but the good news is you can pretty much work from anywhere when you have the right equipment. And if you drive up the road a little ways and stop at a good hot spot area, you can keep doing business. But to answer your question, I got in this space in 2007, 2008, in a more traditional way. Over the last 6 or 7 years, I realized that there's a gap. There's a blue ocean, in my opinion, but there's a big gap in support for high income earners that pay a lot of taxes on their active income, or for individuals that have just done well with picking assets and selling those assets in the future, and they have huge capital gains tax events. And there's not a lot of help out there. There's not a lot of resources that really dive into the more advanced areas of tax planning. And when I say that, that's to no disrespect to solid accountants out there, to really good CPAs and enrolled agents and even financial advisors. They're using all the information that they have access to. But as you know, there's 70,000 pages of tax code. And if you don't have the time or the license to navigate that 70,000 pages, you're likely going to be paying retail taxes. And I always say, who likes to pay retail for anything? When you're buying and shopping, you want to pay wholesale. And if you know that there's a coupon code or something, some type of way to achieve that discount, then you're going to likely utilize that. The same rules apply with taxes, but 8 out of 10 CPAs just don't have the bandwidth, time, or licensing to do that forward-thinking planning. And it does take a lot of time. So what I've done in a nutshell, it's created a business where I'm a tax savings architect. I've created relationships with over a dozen advanced tax planning groups, and each of them does something very specific. And I look at how these things can be integrated in when I'm working with clients. And most of my clients come from real estate professionals or tax professionals or wealth managers or insurance producers, because they're looking to essentially have more money to help their client with. And the client wants to send less money to the IRS or have more money to work with. So I created an opportunity to say, hey, I can help individuals with tax problems, whether it's long-term capital gains, short-term capital gains, taxes on passive income, or obviously taxes on your active income. And I can do it without replacing your CPA. I can work with your CPA, and I just integrate it in additional layers of efficiency through the network that I've created of solutions.
I mean, you've really, I guess, found a way of that old saying, knowledge is power, right? I mean, you've built this niche that is that probably wasn't there, I mean, before you got into it. So before we get into that journey of how you kind of built this niche, let's talk about a young Mark. I mean, a young Mark, I'm guessing he was really into tax code. He was really into reading. Who was a young Mark?
That's a great question. This is where it gets interesting, because people always ask me, well, how did you get where you are? A young Mark was very athletic. Probably, if you're seeing, if you saw my entire profile now, you'd say, what happened to you? Not as athletic as it used to be. Young Mark was very athletic and went to college and decided to go from architecture to building construction to exercise physiology. got my bachelor's degree in exercise physiology, got my master's degree in sports management. Moved to New York City to manage a high-end fitness brand. If you're from Miami or San Francisco or LA or any big city, Chicago, you'll probably know Equinox. So I went to work for them when they only had 11 clubs. Moved to Los Angeles, helped them open up a number of different locations, and worked with a couple of other club companies as well. But in that process, I became an owner-operator. So I really didn't matter how much I knew about exercise physiology. Obviously, that helped because I was speaking the language of the business. But what really mattered was driving revenue and reducing expenses and creating EBITDA margin, right? As any business owner knows, it's all about EBITDA. It's all about how much profit they're keeping, not about how much revenue. And of course, when you're looking at your profit that you're keeping, the question then becomes, well, how much do you have to give to the IRS? That's a huge expense that comes every year. So I realized after grinding it out in the fitness industry and managing and opening clubs that were multi-million-dollar clubs with high EBITDA margins, that I was never going to make the income I wanted. So I knew how to speak business owner language, and I understood if I become a consultant to business owners, I can do better financially, and ultimately do what I love to do. So I made that break, and I ended up getting into kind of advanced insurance planning. And over the course of the last 15 years, I've realized, particularly in the last 7, that there's this opportunity that's void in the marketplace for someone to really go out there and search multiple avenues of tax efficiency that you are utilized in specific situations and put them all together. So how I got here today is really interesting. I remember my exercise and sports days, and I can apply them when I'm doing my own workouts. But for the last 15 years, and more particularly the last 7 years, it's all been about financial efficiency, EBITDA margins, and more importantly, whatever that net income is that ultimately rolls down to your 1040 or taxable income. How do you keep more of it, right? How do you pay wholesale taxes? Because we know 50 of the top 100 Fortune 500 companies had billions of dollars in profits, paid zero in tax. How does that work? Well, that's what we talk about.
Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. Okay, you get out of college, you start at Equinox. What department were you in out of college?
So I started at the 63rd Street and Lexington Avenue Equinox in summer of 2001. I had just finished my graduate degree at the University of Florida, and I had run all the educational programs at UF. I ran all the strength and conditioning locations on campus. I worked at a local club as a manager. I moved to New York. I followed a girl. There was a girl that actually I was dating that was an architect. She worked in the 33rd floor of the North Tower. So she was there when it got hit, but she fortunately made it out. And unfortunately, others weren't so lucky. But I was a fitness manager, a personal training manager. I managed a team of 65 trainers above the Barbizon Hotel or below the Barbizon Hotel on 63rd Street in Lexington, New York. And that's where I kind of cut my teeth on business in the fitness world, running that department within the club. And then I became more of a club opener and club manager when I moved out to LA.
So right out of college, because you had some sort of background in college in the physical fitness world, they basically gave you the opportunity to kind of manage right out of college?
Yeah, and the reason for that is because in college I was very active and participated in the strength and conditioning and the recreation centers that the campus ran. So I was the head personal trainer, and then I was the graduate coordinator, and I oversaw the lifestyle appraisal center. So I was managing hundreds of student employees as a graduate assistant in grad school. And I also, at the same time, I'm in the military, so I was a reservist for the Marine Corps. So I was doing my Marine Corps reserves in Jacksonville. And at the same time, I actually took on a job with a local fitness club, and I became the assistant general manager there. So I was doing all those things at the same time. So I didn't sleep much in my last 2 years of college. So when I went to New York, they said, hey, we see your background. We see you just got out of college, but you've got 2.5 years of management experience. That's very depthful. So it was a blessing to be able to walk right into one of their highest caliber clubs and manage 65 trainers right out of the gate.
And then how long after you joined up with them did they give you the opportunity to move to LA and open up shops out there?
2 years. So within 2 years, and it was a nice run. Unfortunately, 9/11 happened literally a few months after I moved to New York City. It was just quite an experience to go through in life in general. But being right there and ultimately being able to see the towers from 63rd Street and Lexington Avenue. But in that 2 year span that I was there, we were just very, very successful. We did the most personal training sessions ever in a calendar year. We did the most revenue in a calendar year. And the executives in the company, there was only 11 clubs in New York at that time. Right now they have 80 plus clubs internationally, London and Toronto and LA and Chicago and San Francisco. And they were opening their second club in LA. They already had a Pasadena club, and they were opening their West Hollywood club right on Sunset Boulevard across from Mel's Diner. So I raised my hand because I was in the Marine Corps and I spent my training in Camp Pendleton. So I love the West Coast. I'm an amphibious tanker while I was. I did my training out in Del Mar, 21 area of Camp Pendleton. So Oceanside, Carlsbad, all those areas. I loved them. So I said, hey, send me out. And of course, if you're going to send me out, I want to move up. I want to start running clubs. So when I moved out, I managed clubs, opened up clubs as general management, and then of course started duplicating that process. Santa Monica was the next club, and then Palos Verdes was the next club, and Westwood, and then Newport Beach, and really just started duplicating that system for them. And in that process, I'm helping them duplicate, right? I'm helping them create systems at the same time as I'm duplicating. So that was really what catapulted me into business consulting and essentially saying, hey, I like the financial side of this, even though I understand how to make the shoes. Analogy, right? I understand the fitness side. I don't need to make the shoes anymore. I can just run a business or any business or help other business owners do the same.
Now, they weren't your companies yet. You were kind of taking the reins of building these businesses and at these different locations. What was the process like? What was the structure like? Is there like a brief overview that you had to do? Hey, I have to hit these 3 steps, 5 steps, 10 steps, and I know I'm going to have a successful location.
Yeah, for the good news is Equinox, and it's kind of like a plug-in. They're a great company. They were creating their duplicative process, and of course, at the same time, refining it. The most important thing for them was location, because it's not a $25 a month club. It's $150 to $200 a month club with the expectation that you're going to also buy Pilates sessions, you're going to do spa services, and you're going to work with personal trainer. Right. So it really is, and you're going to use it because it's ultra lush, ultra clean, and a very good experience with high quality. So the location was key. I didn't have to pick out those locations. And the second most important component was your staff, right? It's people and places and programs. I always thought it was like 3 Ps. You got to have the place, the location, you got to have the right people. So that was the key. If I hired the right personal training manager, he would hire the right trainers. If I hired the right group fitness coordinator, they would hire the right group fitness instructors. If I hired the right massage or spa director, they would hire the right estheticians and massage therapists, right? So, and then of course it's just running. And of course the sales manager, you got to hire the right sales manager. They're going to bring the right staff on. That's going to drive people. Hey, people walk out like, why do I have to have a membership with this location? So that was the key. So it was places, the people, and then the programs. And the programs were essentially kind of turnkey. Equinox has done a great job with their group fitness and their training and their spa. And it was just really managing what they had already put in place and then creating more efficiencies along the way.
Well, then I guess it brings up the next question, because one of the things you brought up was hiring great people. So what's the hiring process? Because I'm guessing you've probably used this hiring process when you've brought other people on to your team over the years.
Yeah, a lot of times I look at a 360 view. I almost request that they interview me when I'm going through an interview process, because the more knowledge that they have and they express with their asking me questions, it helps me understand their thought process, like how do they process and how do they solve problems, and also what do they know about the space that they're interviewing about. Right. So it's almost like if I can make them ask me questions and do a 360 and also ultimately help them give me real life experiences of how they solved a problem in the past in that walk, in that type of work, it really helped me to understand who they were. So that was kind of my little hack, so to speak, in my interview process, was to actually try to make them interview me and give them the questions that they would need and give them the prompting to essentially ask me a lot of questions, which would, and also ask them to give me scenarios in the past that they had to solve a problem so I could hear how they went through it. And if I knew that they didn't have anything to reference, then they didn't have a lot of problems to solve, so they didn't have a lot of experience. And if when they're asking me questions and interviewing me, if they didn't know what to ask or have any relative questions or components, I knew that they didn't really know a lot about the subject matter. So really, that was my hack for the hiring process.
All right, so you're having good success with Equinox. You see there's kind of a inefficiency where they can save more money, and now you're looking at the opportunity that other business owners are probably dealing with this too. So you would think that, okay, well, I want to go become a CPA, or I want to do this. What was the thought process of going, you know what, I can just build this own niche of company?
Vinny, that's all. Thank you for asking that question. And it was kind of a silly, I'll give you a silly answer because I was younger. This was 15 plus years ago. And I was very successful at a very young age in that space within a confine, right? I was working within a box that was already successful. It wasn't like I blazed the trail and did it all myself, but I helped expand and increase efficiency in what was happening. So I left that space and said, there's a lot of business owners that need the help that I can provide with regard to coaching and mentoring, but ultimately looking at their profits and revenues. And I'm going to do it all by myself. Right. And of course, I learned quickly that, hey, when you're working in an entirely new space, even though I had a baseline foundation, but I worked in an entirely new space, which is the financial element and the accounting element, even though I wasn't planning to be a CPA and I didn't want to do tax returns or become an enrolled agent. I did get my insurance license because there are a lot of advanced insurance planning hacks or things that not hacks, planning strategies that can be used that are very important. But that was just the start. But I fell on my face quite for the first year or two. Had to pick up my boots and manage clubs again for a year or two. Finally, in 2014, I re-entered the space and said, okay, great. Now is my time to really build out a new niche. And in addition to partnering up with some really sound resources in the tax planning space, I just continued to seek out more opportunities, more avenues, because I realized there's a lot of things out there that you have to know. It's like in real estate, right? It's a pocket listing, right? You're not going to know unless you're working with Vinny, right? You're not going to know about that property unless you're working with Vinny. So the same rule applies. You're not going to know about that tax efficiency unless you're working with Mark, right? Because I've taken the last 7 years to essentially explore, due diligence, vet, and essentially bring into my fold different groups that create business efficiencies that essentially via the tax code can significantly reduce taxes. So that was my journey out to, springboarding away from Equinox, falling on my face, and essentially figuring out how to do what I'm doing now.
What was the time frame of that? So you get the idea, if people watch Shark Tank, there had to be a better way. And right, you go, okay, I'm getting a steady paycheck at Equinox and I want to start my own business. Was there overlap? I mean, what kind of time frame of like, I got to save this much money so I can start my own business? I got to make this much money. What was that process like?
I had just gotten married, and my wife was a very successful nutrition coach and personal trainer. And, we didn't have any kids, and we didn't live high on the hog. And yes, I was walking away from my 6+ figure income, but in LA, that doesn't go too far. Low, 100 plus doesn't go very far. So I said, can we just rough it out for a little bit, right? She continued to train. I basically became an entrepreneur, so she was covering the bases for a bit. So that was kind of how we started the journey. And then, of course, I had the first kid on the way. I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be in the first 2 years. Went back into, so that was 2007. 2010, I went back into management of clubs. Instead of going back to Equinox, which they wanted me to come back, and I wanted to come back with them, but I got a better offer at another club company. If you're in LA, you know the Bay Clubs or Spectrum. And started working with them, but it wasn't until 2015 that I was really able to make that final leap. And one of the impetus was when I finally made that leap, I had enough set aside to really say, I'm going to do it right. I started working with a tax planning group, which is one of the groups that I continue to work with, and they're phenomenal. And this group really helped business owners reduce their taxes by creating like a management and consulting company where they could take a lot of their current income as tax-free fringe benefits if they were to structure correctly. And they also had and they still do, a really unique way for manufacturing companies or companies with lots of payables to outsource a portion of their work into an economic development zone. And that way they could take a portion of their profit through an EDZ, and an EDZ might have a 4% corporate tax and no tax on top of that if you're for your dividend as an owner. So that was my impetus to say, wow, I can use this resource to get in front of high income earning business owners to say, I've got more than what your current advisor has. I've got more than what your current CPA has. I've got more than what your current insurance producer has, which opened the door for me to actually talk about other things. But what happened was I realized that that's not the only game. There was like this other group that does this solution. There was another group that handles capital gains tax. And I started putting all these elements together. And I said, hey, I don't need to really sell insurance anymore. I don't really need to be in the financial planning space. I can really just be a broker or a tax savings architect and get paid enough from these groups that do this work to essentially help bring business to them and shepherd that money, that business to them. So I'm essentially a broker of advanced tax planning, and I work with CPAs, with insurance producers, with wealth managers, and with, obviously anyone that has access to high income earning clients that wants to help them.
Now, you had such great success at a young age, right? You get the idea of, I'm going to start this company. You ask for the opportunity from your wife, basically, to take the reins, to pay for that base. Yet it didn't work out the first time. That had to be fairly deflating, I would think. So what goes through your mindset when it's kind of deflating and having to go back to your wife that I have to go get a 9-to-5 job again?
Well, you hit the nail. I mean, it's just obviously when you fail, there's a defeating factor mentally and psychologically. But just to have a fun comment on your comment, fitness and managing health clubs is definitely not 9 to 5. It's more like 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. and weekends and holidays. But, when you're tapping into personal development, when you're tapping into coaching, you realize the most successful people are the ones that failed the most, but never quit. They always got back up. And every time they failed, they learned something. They learn what not to do, right? Mm-hmm. So it's almost like if you learn what not to do, eventually you're going to figure out what to do. So that was my saving grace in saying that, hey, a lot of very successful people have failed, and I'm just in that category. And as long as I learn from my failures, get up and try again, and most importantly, do it more efficiently, or attempt to do it more effectively and efficiently and smarter and wiser and using more resources, being more resourceful, you'll win. And it's come to fruition, particularly I'd say in the last 5 years. It's really come to a powerful point in that there's a lot of need out there, and there's not a lot of people that do what I do.
Did you self-realize this about the failure idea of it, or is it something that you came through, or someone helped you kind of realize?
Yeah, I had to essentially get pulled up off of the ground by others around me, other mentors that had been through that and said, hey, it's just a process that you go through. If you don't quit, you don't give in, and you continue to learn, you'll win. And then they helped me plug in, obviously the Tony Robbins and the Bob Proctors and the John Asseroffs and the Gary Kellers, right, of the world. You start really learning and understanding how to apply business success and business principles to whatever you're doing. And that's really shaped me. And of course, more recently, which is a true blessing, is my faith. I didn't have that for a number of years, but within the last 4.5 years, I was called back to really understanding who God was, who our Savior is. And it was interesting because when that occurred, things got a lot easier. I'm not saying that just because I have a certain faith and belief that, all things are, rainbows and unicorns and gold, and money around every corner, but I could handle things significantly differently. And it wasn't, and my strive was obviously before, it was always, how successful can I be? How much money can I earn? And it wasn't because I wanted certain things. It wasn't because I wanted boats and mansions and cars. It was because I wanted to be philanthropic. I wanted to basically give back. But until I met my creator and understood Yeshua, Jesus Christ, the person that ultimately sacrificed and saved us, going into this weekend, it's interesting, we're going in this weekend. I didn't understand what the meaning was to be philanthropic. I didn't understand what the meaning was to not need all these things. And once I understood that and then applied all the success principles that I learned through all these people, it's just amazing how it's all fallen in place. And I can tell you, like, we could go through a whole nother podcast if you wanted to about how I've been blessed throughout my life and how I've seen it now in hindsight. And then of course, seeing it forward, just because I'm doing the things that are appropriate in God's eyes. And but even if I had no blessings at all, I'd ultimately have the ultimate blessing, which is eternal favor and eternal life. So hopefully it's okay that I threw that in there.
No, Bert, different people that I've had on the podcast. Most people on the podcast, they have a big why. They have a reason. They have something that pushes them through the low moments. They have the thing. Sometimes it's religion based. Sometimes it's a person. Sometimes it's a memory. So it's, we're each going to be driven through those moments by something. And I think it's great for people to be honest and open to whatever that item, that person, that thing is for them. You've talked about growth. You talked about bettering systems. You talked about kind of being better than you were last week, right? So if we're talking in 5 years from now, where do you see yourself and where do you see your company going?
Wow. That's a great question. And, if you're applying the principles that you learn, you're never dribbling with your head down, right? You're not, you're Magic Johnson or John Stockton, right? Where every player on the court is, where the passes should go, or you're Wayne Gretzky, where the puck is going, not where the puck is. So 5 years from now, I expect there to be more competition in my space. But I also expect to have created an opportunity to allow for others that want to do what I'm doing, right? To be able to have a Keller Williams type model, to really essentially allow for people to have a business within a business that they never outgrow the bubble that they're in, because the bubble that they're in is always growing. So I expect to mentor and train others that want to do what I'm doing, while at the same time mainstreaming and becoming, taking what I'm doing and making it much more, what's the word I'm looking for? Much more accepted, right? Because there's this taboo with taxes, right? Some people think, oh, well, I have to pay my taxes, right? Or I'm not doing good, which is, listen to Judge Learned Hand, which was one of the highest appellate judges in tax court. And he would always say, no person is legally due to pay a dime more in taxes than what is legally right. And there's two systems in America of taxes, one for the informed and one for the uninformed. He says both are legal, right? Whether you're informed or uninformed, they're both legal as long as you're navigating the legal pretense of the law. Then if you're paying 7% tax as opposed to 50% tax, as some Californians are doing that do well, it's because you're informed on what you can and can't do. It's not because you're doing anything wrong, right? And I haven't yet met one business owner that has told me, I think that the federal, and I'm not knocking our government, I'm just saying that I don't think that they can spend it as wisely as I can. Right. So when they can keep more and pay less and put that money to work, maybe creating new jobs or maybe, being philanthropic themselves and supporting certain areas that they feel in their community needs support. That's a beautiful thing. So that's where I see myself in 5 years, is expanding on what I'm doing, having a larger practice, making it more commonplace so more business owners and high net worth individuals realize that there's a way to navigate tax law like Microsoft and General Electric and Amazon, because they don't pay taxes, right? But they're not hurting on profits. Let's put it that way, at least the ownership groups. So and then of course, mentoring others to do the same.
Thank you, Mark, for being on the Road to Growth podcast today. I mean, if people are listening and they're getting excited about, you know what, I want to save some money. I mean, for the people that are saying, well, I want to give my money away, that's a different thing. But the people that are getting excited about that and looking to save some money, what's the best way of them reaching out to you, getting more information?
Yeah, thank you. Just go to my site, go to my website. It's Peak Profit Solutions. So solutions is plural, Peak Profit is singular, peakprofitsolutions.com. You'll learn a little bit about me. And there's essentially, you can look at some case studies if you click and request case studies, but you can also just click and ask for a 15 to 20 minute consultation. There's no cost. You don't have to be prepared. If you're looking to sell a highly appreciated asset and you've heard, say it's real estate and you've heard a 1031, but you don't want to do a 1031, you want another approach that might be more efficient, give me a call. If you're just making a lot of money because you're successful, whether you're a W-2 income earner at a corporation or you are a business owner, which is a lot easier to help because you have more flexibility in how you take your income, give me a call. Let's talk about your situation, because there's likely 1, 2, or 3 layers, maybe even more layers to integrate in with what you're doing. And we can seamlessly integrate that. And you don't have to really disrupt your current business. We're just basically helping you keep more, right? So if every year your profit is X, but you're keeping 50% more of your profit because you're not sending it out quarterly to the federal and state government because you're not paying retail anymore in taxes, we're showing you how to pay wholesale in taxes. What can that do for your business? So I love to have a conversation with anyone that wants to explore further, and peakprofitsolutions.com, and just set up I have a calendar available. Just find a time and we'll talk.
Well, again, thank you, Mark, for being here. I have one last question for you. Is there, if you could look back at your younger self, that person that was transitioning into the business that you built, that had to go back to the corporate world, go back to the fitness world, in that low moment right there, or maybe someone else listening right here that's in that low moment that maybe didn't succeed the first time through, is there any advice you would give yourself or that person?
I would have them look at their future self and essentially ask themselves, future self, what do you want that to look like? And of course, if you want it to look like a certain way, even though you took a short-term loss, you took a short-term failure, but it hasn't defeated you in saying, I still want that goal. I haven't given up on that goal. Then you have to say, well, what do I need to do right now in my present situation to contribute to that future self? And if that's the case, well, maybe short term, you did have to go back and do some things to earn income or things that you needed to do. But how can you every day do more of the activities that will help you create the future self that you're looking for? And it might be, that you have to work a little bit more. You might have to work on the weekends or in the evenings, because your dream is where you're working on the evenings and the weekends, and then the day you're working on your income. But pretty soon you can essentially shift gears and go back and create and God will open up an opportunity for you, right? That, if you're working hard enough, the opportunities will present themselves because you know what to look for. If you're not working hard enough and you're not learning about your space, then you might miss the opportunity. It might have been there, but you might have seen it in the past, but you missed it, but now you see it. So never forget where you want to be as your future self, and never forget that if you're not daily taking action on changing things, right? If you do the same thing over and over again, you get the same results. That's called insanity. So even if you have to take a step back, continue to work on your current self and keep the vision of your future self, and make those changes so you can recognize opportunities when they come about, and they will come about, and just take them. And don't be afraid to fail, right?
No,
fail
exactly.
And get up and do it again.
I mean, everyone fails. It's just a matter of learning something from that failure and kind of pushing forward. Again, thank you, Mark, for being here today. I mean, for everyone listening, you might have a path that you're really good at, which, I mean, Mark had that success in a corporation he was really good at, and he saw the opportunity. So there's probably an opportunity even for you in your everyday routine. And maybe it's not conventional. Maybe it's not something that other people have done. Yet, if you see the potential in it, have faith in yourself, have faith in the growth, have faith in what you can do, because you can do whatever you want if you put together that game plan, where you're going to be in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, I mean, 10 years. So thank you guys for subscribing. Please share, and go find Mark. His information is in the show notes. Bye, everyone.